everybody. Welcome to Go Bold. My name is Jody Atariwala, and I'm your host. And in Season 1 of Go Bold, we spoke with people who are serving with the Royal Canadian Navy. They come from all walks of life and all parts of Canada, and they are wonderful ambassadors for the country and for the Navy. So we encourage you to go back and watch Season 1 as a precursor to this season, Season 2. And for this season, we're going to be focused on the Royal Canadian Navy's Halifax class frigate. And the Halifax class is a surface combatant. And that means it's able to do anti-air warfare, surface warfare, anti-submarine warfare, and a number of other roles. The Royal Canadian Navy has 12 Halifax class frigates. 7 of them are stationed in Halifax. 5 of them are stationed here at Canadian Forces Base Esquimalt. The Halifax class ships were built at Davie Shipbuilding and at St. John's Shipbuilding, and they've all recently been modernized. So what you'll see in this season is the men and women of the Royal Canadian Navy that come together to make a Halifax class ship come to life. So welcome everybody to Go Bold, and I hope you enjoy this season.
Side.
I'm joined by Commander Sam Patchel, who is the commanding officer of HMCS Ottawa. Captain, thank you so much for joining me today.
Okay, yeah, well, welcome aboard. I hope you enjoyed yourself so far already.
It's a beautiful ship, and everyone's been awesome thus far, and I expect that to be the case my whole visit here. But so, as I've asked some of your colleagues, tell me about your motivation to join the military. A little bit about your upbringing and what made you specifically choose the Navy.
Right. Okay. Well, I grew up in the North Shore of Vancouver, and I thought it was actually the seed in my mind of joining the Navy was my grandfather taking me down on board one of the ships when it was in at Canada Place. I was probably 11 or 12. He had served in World War II, and it was just an opportunity. I remember walking around, and it just kind of, so that was planted in my brain at 12 or whatever it was. And then fast forward, I went to UVic. Was going to school, was doing co-ops and kind of thing. And I want something different. At the time, I was 22 and thinking I'm about to graduate, and what am I going to do? And I was working with actually people my age now that had been doing the same thing for 20 plus years, and all they did was count their hours of when they got their lunch break, when they got their coffee breaks. All right, this isn't for me.
Right.
And I got to try. So I'm about to graduate, and I could have gone down that road. I could have continued in school, but sorry, 5 years into a 4-year degree, I was realizing that it may be something else. I needed something else, and then I thought, I'll try the Navy. My cousin was already in. He suggested I join the Air Force, and then I said, you know what, I'll try, and I'll join the reserves.
Okay.
My spot was taken. So they said they only have so many spots.
Okay.
So recruiter said, would you like to join the Reg Force instead? I said, what's the Reg Force? Oh, it's the same as the reserves. And yes, and so there's people in they aren't the same.
They're right.
I have no idea. And then I sort of went through the whole process. It took a while, as it does. And then I still remember. So they actually flew me to Halifax for a Naval Officer Assessment Board week. It's a whole experiential thing, and they kind of test whether we're fit for the job and also show off a bit of the Navy. Okay. And then September 6, 2001, I signed on the dotted line. And I don't know if you remember what happened 5 days later.
Right.
Yes, yeah. September 13th, 2001, I flew to St. Jean, Quebec, in Montreal. Flew to Montreal and started basic training. And kind of no idea what I got myself into. And I've just been fumbling along for 21 years now, or 20 plus years. Yeah, 21 years now. And here I am.
I think you've been doing a pretty good job.
I've done all right, but yeah.
Well, here we are. You are now commanding officer of one of Canada's 12 surface combatants. For those that are not familiar with what the Halifax class ship or the Halifax class ships are, how would you describe it? And tell me about commanding a ship.
Okay, commanding the ship may be a little easier, but really what they are, they're a frigate by designation. Their primary role is anti-submarine warfare, but they're really a multi-role warship, especially in today's modern age, of what is defined as a aircraft carrier, battleship, destroyer. Those are the nomenclature of old in reality. Mm-hmm. So we multi-role with maritime interdiction operations is one thing we do to we're a point defense ship with our missile systems, as well as we have other missile systems that can reach out and touch other surface combatants. But our role, particularly because of our role in the greater defense of not just Canada and North America, of anti-submarine warfare, that's what these were originally designed for, and what as Canadians we try to focus as a skill set that we hone. Mm-hmm. Really, we're at the end of the day now, we're a tool of the government of Canada, right, that to represent Canadian values abroad. We fly the Canadian flag, and when a Canadian ship pulls into a foreign port, they represent the best of what is Canada, and it's not an invasion force entering that country, right? Right. And so when we participate with our allies and our partners, trade partners, and countries that we want to help in develop our relationships, this is what the Navy's there and able to do without raising tensions, and just be flexible, being able to respond to distress signals, foreign and domestic. So every time we're underway, we're ready to respond and provide help, but we're also ready to respond to deter aggressors. And the thing with ships and what navies do, it's about maintaining the playing field or the battlefield. It's complicated in essence, but you don't hear a lot about the many Navy battles over the way when armies meet. They tend to meet and engage. Right. Navies maneuver and demonstrate their capabilities, demonstrate particularly their interoperability, which is one of the critical things, especially in our world nowadays, is being able to integrate with other nations together and to work toward a common goal. Mm-hmm. Which is something Canada does very well, and we enjoy. We might be a small Navy. The ship is not a command platform, but we can take on a command staff and then be responsible for not only this ship, but then a group of ships operating in concert together to a common goal.
Right. And having a Navy, it is significant to have a Navy because so much of the world's global commerce flows through sea lanes of traffic. And so I would imagine, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but mm-hmm. but part of what having a frigate allows you to do is to maintain those sea lanes of commerce, communication. Open.
Exactly, and it is incredible the amount of global trade that just happens uninterrupted because that it's a free and open space. But you need to be much like police that patrol an area. They're not always engaging bad actors, right, but they're present, right. And then everyone just moves about freely, and to maintain that is something that navies do. Now there are certain areas of the world that change or that may disrupt that and engage, and so having a navy to be able to basically guarantee our own interests abroad. We receive commerce from all over the world. We depend, and as COVID has reminded us, sea lines of community are just supply chains and the challenges that we've seen in the last couple of years. That navies aren't less important, but more important to keep those lanes open and to be flexible too, as they change, so that we can. The nice thing with ships is they're maneuverable. They don't always have to go in the same direction. I'm sure there's something in an area of the world change. Well, we can all move into a different direction, but in doing so, we then have to put the levers in place to make sure it's done safely.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Just watch what we're making good. they're still clearly drawing left. So let's come slow left. Your easy left there.
Port 10.
Port 10. 10 port wheel on, sir.
Very good.
Good coho. I'm trying to find them. You have them that. Ease it to 5.
East to 5.
East to 5. 5 port wheel on, sir.
Very good. Steady 150, sir.
Okay. Range and bearing to coho now.
170 at 10 miles, sir.
Okay, let's.
You're thinking about dumping these guys?
No, well, we can do that too. Steady here.
Midships. Starboard 5.
Starboard 5. 5 starboard wheel on, sir.
Very good. Midships.
Midship.
Steer 140.
Steer 140.
Do you have a visual on coho yet?
Steer course 140, sir.
Very good.
Yeah. They haven't even checked into traffic yet. They're at the rotary, so they're not even on. So in 6 minutes, they're going to be there. In 6 minutes, we're here. Yeah.
You attribute to your success, meaning to achieve the rank of commanding officer of a surface combatant ship, you had to perform to a certain, I guess, caliber, but you also had to show that you were capable, right, of doing what the Navy would call upon you to do.
Right. So it's both an easy question and a hard question. I would say it's just to get here is not, you are the sum of a array of experiences,
right.
And then even before I joined, I came with a series of experiences, and I've had to, as I've progressed, reflect on, well, why was I successful in this and others not. I've always had very good spatial awareness. So in our initial training, it's all about maneuvering a ship around other ships and the basics. In school, I was very strong in math, so some of the things that others may have found challenging, I didn't find as challenging. Mm-hmm. And then I started finding myself a little distracted, so I took up teaching swimming to children on weekends to keep myself out of trouble. But I'd always worked with children, and I found actually, so I used to be a summer camp counselor and instructor before I joined. Those skills I learned in my summer times. You're surprised that yes, I lead adults now.
Right.
A lot of the tools are the same. Maybe there's just the only difference really their age. And in some ways, I know I do joke about that. Sometimes this is just like summer camp. Not everyone gets along, and there's certain just simple things about it. Well, something I learned very early when I work with kids is kids don't respond to "Hey you." Right. They respond. So within 24 hours, I'd meet 80 new kids every 8 days. I knew everybody's name, and I would make a point to learn. It was always challenging when there was 3 or 4 Bens or Sarahs, or
sure.
Because I try to put a name to a face.
Yep.
But when you see a kid running away or about to do something, either get themselves in harm's way or harm somebody else, and you call them out by name, they respond. They'll stop and turn.
Right.
Also, if you call them out by name, sometimes for these kids it's their first time away from home, and at least they know who they are, right? And now, granted, every kid wears a name tag, and there's tricks. Well, similarly on board ship, we all wear name tags. It's all our last names.
Right. That's right.
And it's not as personal.
Yeah.
So I've challenged myself even now as I try to know absolutely everybody's name. I haven't gotten there yet, and I've been here now 3 years. I started top down and working my way down, and I'm challenging my staff also, the people they're responsible for, to at least know more than just read their last name, but know who they are. It's much easier to lead people when you know a bit about each and every one of them.
Right.
And so because there are times when you need to, and I get it, there are times where you need rank and name last names is important. On the deck plate, when you're doing the business, it's not up for discussion. But so much of what we do is outside of those moments of when you're either engaging the enemy, or you're maneuvering close formation, or you're giving orders, taking direction. A lot of it is the human interactions in between them, and you want the person, because there are people are living all sorts of complicated, challenging lives. You hope that they trust to see their supervisor and share what their difficulties are, because often what is a big thing to them is actually quite simple to fix, or at least they don't see that we can help or not help. And so if you can say, hey, Dave, how are you doing? Okay, or as opposed to leading seaman Smith,
Right.
how are you doing? There's the reaction you get. Anyways,
Yeah.
so that's how I that's helped me get through leading people as I've led to this the many jobs I've had throughout my career, and I've enjoyed every step. I've learned from some of the best leaders, and I've also learned from not so good. But I've learned that you learn from all those experiences.
For sure.
You're shaped by them, but those experiences help you realize, I like that, and I'll do more of that.
Yes.
I don't like that. I know why I don't like that, and I'm never going to do that. I'm also going to acknowledge that was not good. So when others may do that, and I've been honest. I've been blessed. I've been lucky, being at the right place at the right time, at times, to making your own luck. With something in the Navy, you just have to say yes and volunteer and do stuff, and don't say, well, that's a not so good job, you don't want to do that. No, go do it. Be the one that is the go-to person,
Right.
And guess what, they ask you to do
More.
other cool stuff.
More, yeah.
And that's kind of worked out for me throughout, and that's how I've ended up here. But really because of a lot of great mentors along the way, a lot of inspiring people that I hope to emulate as I was going through. I recently got to see when I was a navigator, my captain, he's on the East Coast now. I got to see him again and truly thank him, because he was one of those people that set me on the right path of just how that, all right, I can be a captain one day too. And he saw more in me than I did at the time. The navigation course is very challenging, and I didn't necessarily think I was going to make it. Actually, that course was one of the two times I was ready to quit the Navy. I didn't think I even cut it as a Mars officer with corporate call. I thought, you know what, I don't have it. And in spite of that, someone else said, no, don't quit. And actually, if there's one advice in the military, we have a lot of things, but the thing I've learned is just don't quit.
Don't quit.
And really, that's a clue for life.
Yes.
Don't quit.
Yes.
Things are hard. Life is hard. It's about it's not what you do, but what you do next. Like when something happens, it's what are you going to do next? And running a ship, these ships we get into all sorts of challenging spaces, from driving a ship alongside where things don't go well, or something happens. Okay, all right, this is where we're at now. What are you going to do next? And it's in those moments that you really figure out how to where you stand. And if you freeze, well, okay, then you're in trouble.
Right.
Hopefully, you build the battle space. And that's one thing where you build yourself space by empowering your subordinates to understand your intent, as opposed to telling them how to do a job.
Right.
So I just need this to be done.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say how it's going to be done, or I'd like the following things to happen so we get these things done, and I want everyone to have this much time to spend with their family prior to deployment. Okay. I don't, that doesn't mean everyone takes the same day off, but according to some of our rules and policies, everyone shall take the day prior to this day. It doesn't always work, but if you can take an order, turn it into some intent, and I need to get the following things, and then over to the people to manage their own, it's amazing the results you get, and you don't have to, you can just sit back.
Right.
You still trust, but as I learned from one captain, trust but verify. So trust that they've done it, and verify that they've done it the way you intended.
Right.
And when they haven't, it's not on them. It's on you that you didn't explain your intent then.
Right.
I've learned that sailors, people, never do a job to do it poorly. If they're maybe they're. You always have to. Well, why did they not understand what I needed, or why it was that important, or what it was, or you wasted all your energy there. All I needed was this. because they didn't understand your intent behind. And as a captain in particular, and I've learned working with other captains, be very careful what a captain says.
Right.
Because the captain will say a silly idea like, it looks like you need a touch of paint. Oh, there's a spot, like literally just a little spot, and walk away.
Yeah.
You come back the next day, there's 3 sailors painting everything, like fixing it all. Captain said, right? And that's the trickle down effect that you have to watch out for. But
Maybe your intent was the whole rooming.
there are some there are times where that is that.
Right.
But for the most part, you have to be mindful, particularly when you become a captain, that what you say, Matt, even the most simple, innocuous things becomes the captain said.
Right.
So,
Right.
yes.
So now, you mentioned about coming alongside, and for those people that are not familiar with the Navy, because people listening to this might be in the prairies,
Right.
They might be somewhere where they've never been on a coast, never seen a ship, let alone a warship. Why is it cool to be in the Navy?
Oh, the amount of places I've been. It's just I've been able to see the world, and not just the way a cruise ship sees it, where they pull in at 8 in the morning and they leave at 1900 at night. And I joked earlier about it being like summer camp.
Yeah.
You got 230 friends and shipmates, and it's a shared experience being on board. And so what we do is hard. What we do is not normal, but that's actually what makes it neat. Is that it just the adventures and the ability to just do. For example, all right, it's a building skill set. So we don't just wait till a person falls overboard. You have some footage of us doing a person overboard recovery.
Right.
So we're driving around, got 50,000 shaft horsepower, need to make a team go, throw an Oscar, throw the mannequin over the side, and turn the ship around, 30 knots, putting the boat in the water, and it's a whole team event. There's all sorts of moving pieces, and when done well, like it's all singing and dancing. It's incredible. And so you can do that, and it's building a team. One of the neat things about being in the Navy, unlike if being in the armed forces, is our mission, like our goal, is not to deliver the bottom line. We're not producing a product. Our product is a fighting capable force ready to defend Canada's interests, domestic and abroad. Like that is, in broad schemes, we are here to be ready to respond when asked to do what the government needs us to do.
Right.
And when you have that as your goal, so all the other stuff, that's the end state. So how we get there, how you keep people engaged, well, you manage them and everything else,
Yeah.
but you have this awesome ship where you're all in it together, and that's something where. So when a ship the ship is a battalion in Army terms. It's a squadron. It's a whole group of aircraft. From the cook is no more than 443 feet away from me to the operation that we're all moving as one. And so when we do a thing, we're all part of it. And the ship, when we talked earlier, I just mentioned about coming alongside. So that same cook who was down in the galley preparing lunch is now after lunch. They're up on the communication net. So the report I give about holding free, that is a cook that's then reporting to the person in charge of that line. It is a whole team event to put the ship alongside. They're as important as one of the most junior people that's sitting way back in my steering gear compartment. And we do some long transit. Their job is to be alert and ready. So if something fails, they take control at that moment. And there is much, even though they don't even see you alongside, they literally in a space. It's noisy. There's a machine, and there's the heading. All they have the heading indicator and the giant rudder post right in front of them, ready to go. But if they don't do their job, I mean, and in essence, if they don't have to do their job, it's a great day.
Right.
They just have to set it. So that's right. It's really neat. And we do it together. So a ship doesn't kind of come alongside into a foreign port. It doesn't. The garbage doesn't get rid of itself. The ship doesn't clean itself. The ship doesn't just defend itself. Yes, there are weapon systems that are designed to engage the enemy, but that needs a human to say, is that a bad person or not? One, what's their intent?
Right.
I don't, there's no way. And we as a team have to work together sometimes in split seconds to identify, work together, and hopefully, when we work together, we know each other. When you start to see a team working really well together, you don't even talk anymore. So what? And if you work with humans and you start to work with people, there's the nonverbal cues of communication. You get the glance and the pointing, the eye contact. It's amazing when that's working well. It's pretty neat.
So, Lieutenant Commander Simmons, tell me a little bit about how you work with the captain, because this particular episode is focused on the command team. And so, how do you distinguish your job from the commanding officer's job?
Yeah, so commanding officer's in charge of everything, right? He has command over everything. The executive officer is really the inside the guardrails captain, right? And for lack of a better term, it's really the person that sets the ship up for success. If it's happening within the ship, if it's to do with training, if it's to do with personnel management, really that's my role. External to the ship, as far as war fighting, that's the captain, right? So really the biggest difference between the two is the fact that the captain will deal with the big broad picture, and I'll make sure that he has all of the tools he requires.
Awesome. Okay. And when we talk about the capabilities of a Halifax class frigate, how would you describe it to those that might not be familiar with what the class can do?
Yeah, so really what you can imagine is these platforms are more multi-role platforms. They can do a whole lot of different things. They're also single-point missile defense platforms, so what that really means is this ship can defend itself in an adverse area against missiles that come inbound. So it has a number of systems that act in a different layer of defense of the ship that allow it to respond and carry on with its mission.
Awesome. And so beyond capabilities like missiles, what are some of the other capabilities that the ship has? Because as you mentioned, it's a multi-role frigate.
Yeah, so a lot of the different things that these ships do. For instance, when they deploy down in the Caribbean, they'll embark a law enforcement detachment with the U.S. Coast Guard. We'll also have our own boarding party team on board, and you never know, we might even bring the Naval Tactical Operations Group, or NTOG, on board with us. With that, we also have a helicopter, so the CH-148 Cyclone really helps us as far as broadening our visual scope around the ship out to greater than 100 miles. Another capability that we've had in the past, and that's something that will come up, is UAVs. So in 2013, when I deployed in Op Artemis, we had the Scan Eagle, and that was really a great tool as far as being able to monitor a situation or a particular arising for a long period of time without having an organic asset up in the air besides the Scan Eagle.
Right on, right on. Tell me a little bit about living aboard the ship. What is that like for you? You've obviously been doing this for a number of years. How would you describe living here?
Yes, so the ship is 134 meters long, 16.5 meters wide, and it's got about 3 decks that you walk on. Not a lot of space for 240 people.
Right.
But it's all about routine. So it's getting into a routine that works for you. So making sure that you have time to rest, making sure you have time to connect with family members, making sure you have time to do your fitness to stay in shape. And of course, the 12 plus hours of work that you'd regularly do throughout the day. So getting in a routine, and the ship helps that because we do have a routine, but also learning over time what works best for you. For instance, for me, I wake up early so that I can exercise on one of the systems before starting my day. And even if that means you lose an hour of sleep, it means that you're also contributing to your health and longer sustainment throughout the day.
Yeah, right on. So this class now has been modernized. Tell me a little bit about what that means to the Navy, because the ships were built in the late 80s and early 90s. They came into service in the early 90s. So what does a modernization for a Halifax class frigate mean, or what does it deliver to the Navy?
Yeah, so this ship in particular just finished its final phase of the Halifax class modernization. So the Halifax class modernization was all about the weapons and sensors, making sure that we were more modern in the warfare capabilities and being able to respond to emergent threats throughout the world. So during that modernization, we brought on board ways to sense and detect at greater ranges with our 3D radar and with other sensing capabilities. And what that has really done is made us a more modern single point missile defense system than what we were when we came out in the 90s. The other thing too is we were able to modernize our flight decks so that we could receive the much heavier Cyclone, and also we did do a little bit of upgrading with our diesel generators, and we have the new diesel generators, so that helps as far as being at sea and not being so concerned about electrical outages of any kind.
Cool. For those that might be interested in the Navy, what would be your advice to people who are listening to this show?
Yeah, so don't wait, right? Like, the one thing that I realized from this is you don't necessarily need to plan a 35-year career in the military. You could do it in 3 years. You can do it in 5 years or 10. Choose your adventure, right? Really, that's what the Navy has given to me. Since joining the Navy, I've been all the way up in Greece Fjord, down towards Curacao, across the Atlantic, through the Mediterranean, around the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea, South China Sea, as far south, heading down towards Indonesia area, Singapore, you name it. Lots of fascinating places. I even did a swimming exercise in Mariana's Trench. So just knowing that there was 10 kilometers of water below you as you're swimming there, there's lots of opportunities. So, if you are considering it or even thinking about it, reach out, look online, just Google online, how do I join the Royal Canadian Navy? You'll find a way to get through it. So.
Sweet. Okay, so Justin, you're the executive officer of HMCS Ottawa. Tell me about meetings that you have to do on the ship.
Yeah, so I was just explaining how the meetings in this cabin that I have to do. So the entirety of the ship's administration goes through here, which is good. But the motivation is knowing
Marine System Engineering Office.
The motivation is knowing that the next level, hopefully you get the opportunity to have a proper cabin, a large space and all that. But sometimes squeezing about 3 or 4 people in this cabin, they're all kind of standing around and we're trying to have, a serious discussion and all that. You kind of have to laugh about it. Yeah?
Well, stand there for 1 second because I'm going to go by you and then I'm going to pivot around.
Okay.
And I'm going to actually take a look at the cabin. So you can have 3, 4. Well, what's the most you've had in here for a meeting?
Probably about 5. Yeah, and you shut the door, and when you're shutting it, you're pushing it. It's like the Tokyo trainway, right? When you're pushing everyone back.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so the bulk of the ship's business happens here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So, Lieutenant Commander, I'd love for you to share one of your more interesting stories from your multi-decade career now, I guess.
Yeah, I've got several, but maybe I'll start when I was a junior officer. I was a bridge watchkeeper on board HMCS Montreal on the East Coast. In fact, the commanding officer was our former Deputy Commander of the Navy, Rear Admiral Sullivan. We left Halifax. We were conducting an exercise. It was my first time being a bridge watchkeeper. It was what you would encapsulate one of the most interesting non-deployments that I had ever experienced. So we left Halifax. We were crossing the ocean. Sea state was typical of the North Atlantic. It was rough and bumpy. I remember looking across at HMCS Preserver as it looked as though it was just steaming nice and easy while we were getting tossed around in 6-meter seas. It's one thing that I learned is that every moment being on ship, it's real. So when we were crossing, we were about halfway across. One of our crew had injured themselves. Their hand actually got jammed in one of the doorways. So we had to sprint for about 24 hours at 26 knots until we were approximately 200 miles off Ireland. We finally got off there. They were able to medevac the person off, and then we needed fuel. We went into a fuel with the tanker, and of course during the fueling, one of the space heaters that someone brought on board ship fell over, started smoking, created a little fire on one of in General Stores number 2. Not that, this is a glorious thing and all that, but it just seemed to be a cascading thing that was happening. We put out the fire, we got underway, we conducted the exercise, and the exercise was a fantastic one. It was really well set up from the UK. There was American ships there, the Brits were there. It was really, really a good exercise as far as getting in and around. We got to visit Scapa Flow, and right after Scapa Flow, we exited there. The task group was heading southerly, and the Merlin helicopter was coming in to land on board Montreal. Of course, when it went into land, it didn't really have a good look at the flight deck, and it ended up crashing on deck.
Oh no.
Yeah, so luckily, the week before we departed, one of the ready-use lockers on the quarterdeck was just recently installed, and the sponson on the Merlin helicopter just landed on it and rested, preventing anything further from happening. All these things, everyone survived it. Everyone was fine. At the end of the day, even the electrician that jammed his hand is perfectly functioning now and all that. One thing I realized is, yes, it is very real, these things, but it's part of that adventure, right? Where you really need to be safe. There is an element of risk as you're going along. The common denominator of all of it, though, every time we had an incident, we had ice cream on board ship. So since then, I don't really eat ice cream on ship.
Right.
In fact, it got to the point that when the coxswain on board ship was leaving, he really wanted to have ice cream. So what he did, instead of having the ice cream on board ship, he went in the rib, sailed out, or went away from the ship and had his ice cream with his chief. So yeah, just kind of a funny little dip.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm so glad to hear that everyone was okay. But it is indicative of life on board a warship. It's it's a combat ship, and it's serious business. But it's also your home.
Yeah,
So-
it is your home, and that was a great trip for us too, because as a junior officer, being able to go around Glasgow and Edinburgh and those different spots, it was really cool being able to visit those spots.
Yeah. Right on.
So, hey everybody, here we are on board HMCS Ottawa in the coxswain's cabin. His personal cabin, not his workspace. So I'm here with Steve Sheffer, who is the coxswain of HMCS Ottawa. He is the senior non-commissioned officer on board the ship. So Steve, thank you so much for joining me.
Anytime.
Awesome.
Anytime.
So, yeah, perhaps a number of
I love to
times.
have you here.
Thank you, sir. So tell me a little bit about your motivation to serve in the Navy.
Gosh, so I wanted to join the Navy a long, long time ago. I had a lot of family that served in the military in general, and a lot of friends and family also when I was young that were sea cadets. And that's where I really found that love of going to sea and being on the water and working in a team environment. And so after watching my brother and sister go through in the Army and a couple of cousins join the Navy, I said that's the right route for me, and so here I am.
Awesome. So, on a warship, a modern warship, there's a command team.
Yes.
So there's the commanding officer, the executive officer, and then there's the senior enlisted member, and that's you aboard the ship, right?
Right. So there's a bit of a distinction with the Navy compared to the Army and Air Force. The Army and Air Force look at the command team as the commanding officer and their RSM, which would be coxswain in the Navy. In the Navy, we have what's called the Command Triad. So we add in the executive officer to the command team to make this triad. And so the three of us work together really to turn command intent into action.
Right, right. So, on my experiences on board Canadian Navy ships, you know, I've seen many coxswains, and to me, they seem to be more gruff, a little bit more perhaps grizzled. Gruff maybe might not be the right word, but I liken them to like the sheriff of the ship.
Yeah.
Tell me if you agree with that, Keith.
Yeah, there's a certain piece of our job that it's not always fun. We are the chief disciplinarian on board the ship, and so that one of the roles that we have to play is sort of acting like the sheriff. You know, if there's people that are behaving poorly, then you have to do the work to investigate the problems, and sometimes that results in someone being charged. And then you just bring all the players together, similar to what a police officer would do, bring the people to court, and then let the court decide on the final decision of whether or not a person is guilty or innocent, and then what the sentence may or may not be. So yeah, you can liken me to the sheriff. It is one of the things that we have to do on board, and it's important because it helps maintain discipline. But we have other jobs too, and that's just one of the pieces.
Yeah, and what would, as you said, that's one of the pieces, but what would you say is your primary function aboard?
Primary function on board is to work with the crew and make sure the crew and their well-being is being taken care of and being considered when command is making decisions. The captain does not always have all the right answers because the captain and the executive officer have gone through their development in a different situation being officers than I did as a non-enlisted member. And so I can take the perspective of a non-enlisted member to or non-commissioned member rather, to the captain, the XO, and just give them that perspective when they're trying to make a decision that's going to affect the entire ship's company.
Right.
Truthfully, I want the crew to not have to worry about, well, is someone taking care of my administration, or am I going to get to go on leave? Am I going to be able to go on a course because of decisions that are being made that are out of my control? I want them to focus on their job. And when they focus on their job, they're going to be happier here, and they're going to perform well.
Yeah, and I guess a commanding officer and an executive officer, they have their roles and their duties. I guess you have perhaps a better bead on the crew and what they're doing and how they're feeling. Morale's got to be one of the things as well that you got to consider.
Morale's definitely one of the things that we consider a lot, and we work hard to come up with ideas of what can we do to help improve morale, particularly when we're going through some tough periods where there's a lot of hard work going on board, and we ask a lot of the crew. It's the crew that does all of the grunt work on board. Command level just kind of gives the idea of this is what I would like to get done, but it's truly the crew that makes that happen. So when we see there's maybe some issues with morale, take a good look at it and see maybe it's a problem within a specific department, maybe it's a problem across the board where all the crew is kind of unhappy. And we, in the Command Triad, we can make some changes to how we're doing things, or we can plan events and do some fun events just to help improve morale and bring people together, and just a bit of a laugh once in a while is enough to help improve people's morale.
What's your preferred method to give people a bit of a laugh?
Honestly, bringing them together, give them a few moments to just kick back, not think about all the jobs that they have to do. Recently, we did a beer tasting event on board where we had a brewery come down, and they offered up a couple of their different beers, and it was good to have the whole crew up there just mingling and talking, and you see people from different departments talking to one another, and you get that intermingling going on. It's really good to see that. We've done a number of things like that. You know, when you're at sea, we can do things like take hot dogs around the ship and sell them to the people that are on watch. It's just something to make them smile and give them something else to think about.
Right.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, on Canadian ships, because I've been on American ships where you have to pay for your food, on Canadian ships, food is provided to the crew.
That's right. It's done controlled by the logistics department, but it just makes good sense on board, particularly at lunchtime. Rather than asking the crew to bring in a brown bag, like you would at any other office, we just don't have the space for 200 and some odd brown bags in a refrigerator, and we also don't want our crew dispersing for an hour at lunch to come back afterwards. So we make changes in how we feed people while we're away, and we make those adjustments that'll allow us to continue to feed people here.
Yeah, right on. Thanks, Steve.
Anytime.
So here we are on 3 deck.
3 deck.
Of HMCS Ottawa, and we're here with the Coxswain. So Steve, tell me one of the most memorable experiences that you've had on board Halifax class frigate.
Gosh, there's been a lot of them over the years. There's been a lot of good things and bad things. Just one story I'll relate to you was back when I joined my very first CPF was HMCS Halifax, and I was only on board for a few months. I had moved across the country just prior to that, and when I joined the ship, we were a ready-duty ship. So on Friday, I went home after finishing work, and I thought, yeah, I'll get cleaned up, have a good weekend at home with my girlfriend, and lo and behold, the phone rang, and they said, you need to go back to the ship because we're picking up and we're going to sail. And so I returned to the ship that afternoon, and we spent that afternoon, all the next day, storing the ship and getting it ready to go to sea. Ultimately, we ended up sailing, and when we sailed, we weren't given any kind of indication as to where we were going or for how long. What it turned out to be was Halifax sailed in support of what was known as the Great Turbot Tussle with Spain. And so we ended up off the coast of Newfoundland for almost a month, patrolling the area and keeping an eye on a Spanish gunship that they had sent out, while also transporting people from DFO so they could verify the catches of the Spanish trawlers. And so that was kind of an interesting, exciting moment on board when you're just joining a ship, and then all of a sudden you have to tell your significant other, welcome to Halifax, I hope you can find your way around and get a job, but I have to go to sea.
Yeah.
So that was pretty exciting.
Yeah, and you at the time you didn't know what that was all about, so
I had no idea. Yeah. No idea. I had never sailed out of Halifax until that time. So
right.
It was a big deal for us.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that story. Appreciate it. Here we are in the captain's cabin. This is slightly different from the executive officers'
Motivation,
cabin.
right?
Motivation. Yeah.
Yeah,
Gives you a goal to look forward to.
Oh yeah. Also, it's I used to joke about the real estate as an XO. We have a small space, so there's a Command Triad, and when the three of us have a certain level of real estate and the importance of each. He said you don't have a triangle with 3 points, so as much as the square footage in your cabin isn't a lot, it's still part of the triangle, and yes, there's some motivation.